I'm going to call this a joint special meeting of the Tribal Council and Trust Board
Nathan and I can share.
to order at 5:35 and ask my elder Ronnie Paxton to lead us in a moment of prayer.
Our dear Heavenly Father, we thank you so much, Lord, for this meeting. And we just hope and pray that everything goes well. Of course, there's always someone that's different and no telling what they'll say or do. Lord, we just be with poor people that's sick and be with my son, Bucky. And we just pray and hope that everything goes well for all of us. And Lord, we're very lucky to have such a wonderful place to come and have our meetings. Everyone comes and we every day and has lunch, and we really have a wonderful time. We have friends and neighbors and relatives. And Lord, just be with us through this meeting. We are very proud of our tribe. We just hope everything goes well. All these things I say in our loving prayer. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Since this is a special meeting, let me take the liberty of asking the trust board to do their roll call, and we'll do a council roll call immediately after.
Mary Jo? Present. Roger Stewart? Joe Brooks?
Here.
Homer Scott is absent. John Thomas?
Here.
Marilyn Cole is absent. Verna Crawford, secretary, here. We have a quorum.
Could Secretary Randall do the council roll call?
Chief Chester Brooks.
Here.
Assistant Chief Bonnie Jo Griffith.
Here.
Secretary Charles Randall here. Treasurer Benita Shea.
Here.
Member Nikki Michael.
Here.
Member Nathan Young IV.
Here.
Member Joe Brooks.
Here.
All present and accounted for, and we have a quorum.
Can I hear a motion to approve the agenda?
Chief, I would like to make the motion to approve the agenda with one stipulation that comments are limited to 3 minutes.
I'll second.
The motion's been made and seconded to approve the agenda with comments limited to 3 minutes. And I am going to make an announcement here. Since this is a special meeting, actually nothing can be discussed or moved on except what is on the agenda. We've had to include an emergency resolution for our child enforcement and also a travel question. But those items will just take a few minutes. All in favor of the motion to approve the agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
They can't vote on our motions, they have to make their own motion.
I'm not sure about the technicality of that in a joint special meeting.
We can all vote together, there's nowhere in the Constitution that says that.
I,
I mean, come on.
for lack of a parliamentarian, I will,
We've got Robert's Rules of Order right
Right
here.
here.
yeah. But you're welcome to read it if you want to.
I'm not gonna read it, that just, there's nowhere in our Constitution.
Okay, but
that
Miss-
says joint vote.
I agree with that.
Okay.
We've got more guests tonight than usual. First, Joe Brooks.
I'll make a motion from the trust board side to approve the agenda with guests allowed 3 minutes to speak.
I'll second it. We have a motion and a second to approve the agenda with 3 minutes to speak division. All in favor on the trust board? Say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Vote for or against?
Yes. Yeah. We think that we think our members should have more time than 3 minutes.
Three, yes.
Passed.
It was 3 to 2.
Is the trust board going to keep their own minutes on this meeting, or you want to combine those?
It's up to you.
It makes no difference to me. I'll leave notes, we can work it out.
Joe, did you vote on this 3-minute rule?
I did.
Did you vote here? I didn't
I
hear.
voted
You made
yes.
the motion.
I made the motion.
Okay.
Let's proceed with our guests from our best bank. They're going to be able to not only give us a market update and success, but they can also give us some information about forming a trust.
We need to share.
Bring it up.
Share.
Does every trust board member have one of these?
We've got two at the table, Nikki kindly shared hers.
But this is
Scott and Josh, you're on the floor.
All right. We're going to give you an update of the 3 different accounts, or the main account and the sub-accounts. You'll turn to the first section. We'll review the larger main account. You turn to page 1. We'll give highlights, and then you can ask any questions that you need. These are as of the end of February, the information that we'll present. On page 1, you'll see in the top left, as of the end of February, the balance just shy of $4 million, $3,978,000 was the balance in that account. Just as a reminder, on the right, you can see our target for this account is 60% in stocks or equities. That was about 3 or 4 years ago. We made the transition to a more growth-oriented account. Went from an income style payment to fixed percentage. In the top right, just some key statistics that shows you again the market value. And if you'll drop down to the annual income, it shows that the estimated annual income, almost $100,000. That's what's projected in just dividends and interest from the portfolio. Next page, on page 2, drill down into some of the asset class information. If you look on the top right, just as a reminder, you can see the very first category is large cap stocks. The majority of your equities are in large company stocks, dividend paying stocks, very stable, mature companies. We'll see the examples in a minute, but we still have exposure to mid-sized companies and international stocks for diversification purposes. But the core of our strategy is large company stocks. Below that, we'll talk in a few pages, but it shows the breakdown on your fixed income or your bond categories. I wanted to show you a high level. If you'll jump to page 4, this gives you more details right now on how our portfolio team, specifically our equity team, has broken down what sectors of the market they are invested in. And the dark blue is the account, and in the green you can see the S&P 500. What percentage of that index makes up those stocks? So for example, if you look at the fourth from the left, it shows financial stocks. We are overweight financial stocks relative to the broader market. You can see next to that healthcare, we're even weight. And then to the right of that, for example, industrial stocks, we're overweight. So our team will from time to time make decisions on what sectors they feel provide the most value that we will overweight, or what sectors we want to underweight based on where we believe the performance will be in the coming 6 to 12 months. Okay. On page 5, a breakdown of the bond portfolio. On the top left, I want to point out a few items. There's a abbreviation there that says YTW. That means yield to worst. It's a very important indicator in a bond portfolio. That just means under the worst case scenario, all the bonds that you own, if they were to mature or be called away, that you would still have a positive rate of return on that bond portfolio of 3.02%. That's something we watch very closely. If you'll jump down a few lines and see quality, the average quality of your bond portfolio is AA2. Just by your policy and our philosophy, you can see on the bottom right chart, the majority of our bonds are rated AAA, and nothing is below B2A or BBB, which is investment grade. Everything in the portfolio is investment grade or higher. If you look back to the top left at the very bottom line, there's another initial that says DTW. That stands for duration to worst. What that means is, what's the average life of that bond portfolio? And it's a little over 5 years. We're in an environment where interest rates are starting to increase. We're seeing rising interest rates. And in that kind of environment, you want to have a shorter than normal bond portfolio. That's about 85% of the normal benchmark. So you can see on the bottom left chart that we have about 20% of the portfolio is maturing in the next 3 years, a fair amount in the next 3 to 5 years, and then 5 to 10. So we want to take advantage of a rising interest rate environment by having shorter term bonds in the portfolio. Next page, important piece is the performance. If you look to the middle of the page, there's a line that says total managed. and we'll follow that from left to right. That shows the total return of the portfolio after all expenses have been paid. Year-to-date through February 28th, you can see down 0.19%. If you'll remember, in February, the stock market had a 10% correction. It actually was down about 11%. So I wanted to highlight the fact that we finally saw, after almost 2 years of the market going straight up, we saw a 10% correction. On average, the market does that about every 14 months, and it hadn't happened for quite some time. But I wanted to show how well the portfolio weathered that downturn. And in the first 2 months of the year, while we saw a lot of volatility, the portfolio was still held flat during that period of time. In 2017, just to the right, the portfolio did 11.01%. This was a very good return for the portfolio. Below that, you can see the breakdown in equities or stocks, and then fixed income. I'll move all the way to the far right, just to summarize this page. You can see it says since inception. We've been fortunate enough to manage these funds for you for quite some time. And since 2003, we have annualized 6% a year over the life of the portfolio. I'll stop there. Those are the highlights of the account. Behind that is more details and holdings. But any questions before we move on to the other two sub-accounts? Yes, sir?
Since I'm the treasurer of the trust board, this differs from the financials I saw for February. Is that because of our cash account and our budget for 2018?
So the one we just looked at did not include the two sub-accounts that we'll show behind here.
That's what I thought. I wanted to make it clear to all of our tribal members.
Yes, sir.
Because we were still at about almost 4.4 million.
Correct. Yes, thank you. Well, there's two other accounts that will match your financials.
Okay.
Thank you. Other questions before we move on? Okay. Behind those pages, behind page 15, you'll find a separator, and we can highlight those other two accounts. The next one we call the income account. That's where the payments from the main account will go and is there for reserves or payouts as you determine. $381,000 was the balance as of the end of the month. This account is meant to be liquid and safe. You can see it's all in fixed income and cash. That receives those income payments from the main account and is just there for future distributions. If you'll jump to page 3, we'll move forward on that. Again, this account will not see substantial growth. You'll see the performance on page 3 of 5. In 2017, the account did 2.38%. Again, it's just a very liquid, low volatility account meant to pay yield until it's distributed back out. Any questions on page 3 of the performance? Okay. If then you'll turn to the next separator, the final piece is, we've got it categorized as directed account or trading account. It's a smaller account that you see at the end of February on page 1. The balance was $14,000. There's a handful of individual stocks that have been selected in that account. And on page 2, it shows the performance. Those are selected not by our best, but other individuals. And you can can see the performance of that account. Any questions? So that total should match what was on your financials as you referenced between those three accounts.
I have one question.
Yes, ma'am.
How often do you look at the accounts and redistribute the funds that the money is allocated to?
As far as
Do you do it on an annual basis or?
the income that we're talking about?
I receive instruction from Mary Jo and Leslie Young on that on a routine basis.
That's on the smallest account here, it's just a reinvestment account.
It's being live streamed, so they won't be able to hear it if you don't use it. That's just on the smaller account that we just looked at, the reinvestment account.
So, I guess I'll redirect my question on the decisions that where the accounts go, like on your, you've got large cap, mid cap,
Oh.
corporate, those buckets of stock. Where do those go? How often are those annualized or redirected or, percentages changed?
Sure. We have a team of 14 individuals that are our portfolio managers. They monitor the account on an ongoing basis for several things. Those percentages between large cap, mid cap, international, that's really on an ongoing basis that they do that. They also decide how much in each one of those sectors, what individual stocks, individual bonds. That truly is an ongoing review that team of individuals does for all of our accounts. My job as the investment officer locally is to monitor your allocation of 60% stocks, 40% bonds, and if it gets outside that variation, we make the decisions. Is it time to rebalance? Is there a request for cash? Where do we take that from? So it's not systematic where once a quarter we're looking at that. It truly is an ongoing review from that team determining what those percentages and the positions are. Does that answer your question?
Kinda, sorta. It's just, so do you look at it on a monthly basis, a daily basis, depending on what the stock market is doing? Do you, do you reserve it back to look at it on a quarterly basis? Or is it just depending on what the stock market does?
So the investments that you're in, the answer is it's an everyday review of the holdings that we have and those percentages. That doesn't mean we make a change every day. Every week, that team of individuals, including myself, all have a meeting to discuss, do we need to make any changes to those percentages, positions, strategy. We have across the board several accounts that will have this same strategy. There's other types of portfolios that we have. So it truly is at a minimum, as a group, we're talking about those conversations every single week. But there may be a time that our equity portfolio manager decides that it's time to sell a stock for whatever reason. They came out with earnings that wasn't acceptable or some other move, and they'll take that action at any time they deem is the right time to do it.
That helps.
Thank you. Yeah. Yes, sir.
How do you determine the level of liquid assets versus investments? Is that between the different sections? Did you understand that question?
Say that again.
I wondered how you determine how much of the assets are liquid assets and how much are invested in long-term,
Between the two different accounts?
Yes.
Or,
between the two different, three different sections in here.
okay, that was determined by this group of how much was pulled out into the income account and the third account.
Does that go along with the trust document? Well, that's,
Yes, the reinvestment amount is set by percentage. Each year, we look at what was the earnings of our total investments, and then it's split by percentages and budgeted.
Sometimes we look at it twice a year.
yeah. But any excess is reinvested or becomes part of it.
Yes, and that is all lined out, what percentage has to go into reinvestment and into all the different areas, cultural preservation, and so on.
Right.
So it isn't something we arbitrarily say, oh, we'll move this here or there.
So whatever we have been told is the income account, we keep in that strategy. Anything that is not, we will put into the long-term growth strategy of the main account. Any other questions?
Josh, Scott, I don't really have any questions about your report, other than the fact that I've mentioned that we just got a large settlement from the federal government, and there is talk about reserving that money in another trust, possibly. We've talked to our attorney, and even Scott's reported that if we wanted to make the bank a trustee of another account other above and beyond the trust board, that our attorney would have to draw that up. But my question is not about the legality of it, but it's simply a question about safety. Am I wrong that bonds are a safer investment than stock?
In general, yes.
Yeah, I'm wrong.
There are some bonds that are quite risky.
Yeah,
The types of bonds that you own here, in general, are, yes, much safer than stocks. There are a lot of types of bonds that are incredibly risky. So as a general statement, that's correct. The type of bonds that we would purchase for you are over time safer than stocks and lower returning than stocks over time.
and that was the second part of my question. When you get safety, you can expect a lower return.
That is correct.
And on the other hand, I think that's why the trust board, approximately 2 or 3 years ago, increased the holdings in stock and reduced the bonds.
That is correct.
And we earned a lot more money doing that, did we not?
It was a very prudent move by the board at that time. Our outlook for the stock market versus the bond market was very positive, and we certainly encouraged that. that was a very good move. Frequently with endowments or permanent trusts, accounts that will be held for a long time, that is our recommendation, that they be more balanced for growth, knowing that there is some volatility that will come along with that, but your opportunity for long-term growth is much greater with a balanced portfolio.
Scott mentioned to me on the phone that the FDIC guarantees on accounts now something like $250,000, I think you said, Scott. But, and you said, but there's other ways to protect your money. Could you expound on that a little bit?
You bet. In any one individual bank, you're limited to $250,000 of FDIC insurance. We have the ability through our brokerage department to invest in CDs across the country, each one affording that $250,000 FDIC coverage. So we have some customers that have several $1 million in one brokerage account with individual positions that are all insured. You can also invest in U.S. government treasuries that are as safe as the government as you believe it might be, or government agencies. So those are certainly instruments that can be utilized that are backed by the U.S. government, much like FDIC insurance. Many times we get the question of, well, should I invest in a treasury or a government agency? Is that any safer than the FDIC? Remember, FDIC is an agency of the government, so those all have the federal government backing them in some fashion. Those are currently all fairly low yielding investments, but they are safe and they are backed by the U.S. government. Yes, sir?
Our intent is that this money be reserved for future generations, and we want to be sure that it's not something that make sure that this is not something that can be, used at will for other investments or other purposes. We want to be sure that this money is retained for generations and with a growth factor, and as well as being able to provide security for the tribe. What's your suggestions on that?
I'll let Scott touch on that.
I'd like to make a distinction between safety, security, and restriction.
Right.
Safety, as we were talking a moment ago, are investing in those types of securities that have some form of guarantee, backed, for example, by the full faith and credit of the U.S. Treasury. Well, putting all politics aside, when you look at economies, the U.S. Treasury is considered the safest and most liquid in the world. So if you invest in the Treasury, you have a high degree of security. If you invest in a certificate of deposit, you have a high degree of security. Again, as Josh referenced, a lower yield or lower interest rate. Now let's talk about the distinction between that and restriction. If it's the intent of the trust board or the tribe to restrict funds for a specific purpose or for a future intent, and that's where a trust comes into play. The council or the trust board saying, we want to create this specific trust We don't want any access to it until these specific times and purposes. That would have to be something that you would come into agreement with, convey to an attorney, and that attorney properly drafted a trust document, and then appoint trustees to govern that going forward. After that is determined, then the tribe would determine what is an appropriate investment strategy. Do we want it to be 100% secure? Do we want it to be all growth? Do we want it to be somewhere in between? If you can articulate that to an attorney, then it can be done. There's a saying in our business, in the trust and investment world, especially in the trust world, if you can think of it and it can be communicated to an attorney, it can be done. It can be drafted. Yes, sir.
Scott, I was wondering if in those documents you would have an attorney, that we would have an attorney draw up, it could have wording in there like it can only be touched by a referendum vote of the people.
Yes,
I mean, those can be, that can be placed in that document.
Yes, as you can probably imagine, within the depths of our trust department across a 4-state footprint, we've seen institutions draft trusts, but mostly individuals. But as you can probably imagine, let's just take a grandmother who's accumulated a decent amount of net worth, and they want money to be set aside for their children and their grandchildren. It will stipulate, I only want them to have access to this money under these conditions. We refer to that in our business as ascertainable standards. Ascertainable standards. You can only access it for these purposes. You can take that one step further and say, well, that's the trustee's responsibility to determine if those ascertainable standards were met, and therefore the proceeds can be distributed. You could say, it has to meet this standard, and the people have to vote for its approval. And that vote is a simple majority, or 60-40, or 70-30, whatever the council, the board decides. It can be done. Yes, sir.
Gilbert?
This is not a question
Okay.
for them, just a comment. I believe the trust board was set up to manage docket 72 and 298 monies. My opinion is that the interest off of them monies is to be spent to service our tribal members. Like the trust board is doing now. We set a budget every year, but I think the trust.
Point of order. This is, should probably be discussed in,
See,
This,
actually be in new business. Right, or no.
it is on the agenda later on, the Brooks.
It's the second B.
Okay.
Under new business B.
GC. Second.
Are there any other questions from Scott and Josh? Nikki?
I believe I've asked you this before, but I want to make sure that we have this point now. There's a large percentage of stock in ConocoPhillips, I saw. If we were to choose a different avenue, say we didn't want to go with energy, would we have that capability of telling you that?
We have the ability to restrict the purchase of any company. So for example, if you said, do not purchase ConocoPhillips or IBM, our system allows us to put that in there and say, do not buy any of that. We have individuals that have, for whatever reason, they just don't want to own an individual stock. So that is possible.
Those are random companies, I just want to say that.
Yeah.
Wasn't making any reference.
Yeah, we have some that, just for various reasons, they maybe already own some, they just don't like that company. You can name any company, They ask that we not purchase it. We code that on the system, and it will not purchase it. We always want to make sure that you understand that you've asked the portfolio team to make the most money possible in the most fiduciary standard, so any special request might create a better return or less of a return, but that is possible.
Susan Kate?
Yeah, I have a question. When you're investing this money into a trust, and whoever they, either tribal council or the trust board, appoints or not appoints, what I'm trying to say is, when the trust is drawn up, you pay a lawyer to provide the wishes of our council and our trust board. That lawyer, is it your lawyer or our lawyer that's going to draw that up? And also, how much does it cost for, how much does it cost to get a trustee through your establishment?
Arvest Bank,
Go back on like 2 seconds.
Arvest Bank and Arvest Trust Company have a lot of professionals on its staff, including attorneys. However, we are not allowed to practice law, nor is any other trust company, any other fiduciary. So you would have to go to an attorney of your choice to draft the document. And the cost, is very difficult to determine that because I don't know, nor Josh knows, how specific you'll get, what kind of restrictions you'll apply. It's all kind of determined by just how complex the trust is and how much time it takes that attorney to draft the language that you have provided them. I can say this, within Bartlesville, Oklahoma, I can give you a reference that an individual, if I were to go to a couple of the lawyers that I know in the area that draft trusts, and I were to create my own revocable living trust for my benefit, my family's benefit, you're probably talking about $2,000 or less. But again, I don't want that to be too much of a reference because this is a different entity, different potential complexities, and different specialties within the trust and estate planning realm. So it would be your attorney, and I'd say $2,000 is a good benchmark to cite at this point in time.
And the trustee gets paid how much?
The trustee, well, that's a whole different set of answers. Basically, what we would do is if we were asked to be the trustee, not just the investment management department, of which we are right now, it would be 1 to 1.25% per annum. So on $1 million, if that was an example, it'd be about $12,000 a year. Now, it's my job as one of your advisors, and I'm honored to be one of your advisors, to tell you that I believe that within your tribe, you have the expertise, you have the personnel, you have the wisdom to guide and govern the tribe. I believe that you also have the ability to act as your own trustee, and we would assist you in managing the assets to accomplish the goals of that trust. That's just my humble opinion. We are now helping you as an investment manager. Well, even before you knew us, you were taking care of it and doing a good job from all my understanding and my experience. I believe if you were to draft a new trust for a specific purpose, you'd probably be able to do, obviously, the exact same thing. Good question.
I'll take John Thomas, had his hand up first.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you, Chief. If the market crashed again, like it did in the 20s, I think it was, and again in 2008, where everything went south. And let's say that we had something similar where everything went south. People started jumping out of the tall buildings again. Where does our principal stand? And I know our investments would be gone. What about the principal of our 3.9 or whatever it might be right now? Where would that stand? Let's say right now everything went south. Would we lose it all?
No, you wouldn't.
How much would we lose, or what would the damage be?
I'll let Josh communicate that in a lot more detail. But I can tell you as a point of reference, in 2008, 2009 actually, one of our 50% portfolios in equity and 50% fixed income, during that really horrible time of what, negative 40% in 1 year in the stock market, our portfolio that we were managing for those people and institutions was down 10%. I don't like any loss, but you can probably imagine the relief of people when they came in to see Josh and I and say, okay, how bad is it? And we said, you're down 10%. Oh, that's all? I mean, when you watch TV, I'm not diminishing how horrible that recession was. It was awful, very painful. However, one of the hallmarks of trust departments and their investment philosophy is we're going to try and manage the portfolio for growth and for income. So there's a component that's pretty much always safe and a component that's a little bit more risky. You blend them together, yep, loss can come. But the likelihood of losing it all, practically nil. So as a point of reference, 2009, about a 10% decline.
I go with that. That is correct.
Thank you.
Oh, why don't you embellish
Yeah,
on
but
how we
comment.
communicate with them?
Go ahead. What was your?
I think this is a really good follow-up point.
Yeah.
So I told you about the result. Josh is going to tell you about what we do when we see difficulty coming.
Okay.
So one of the things that the question was asked over here about how often do we look at the portfolio, how often do we make changes, just like about 3 years ago when we talked and decided to increase the equity allocation because of what our team saw as opportunity, we would have the same conversations if we saw things become very negative, that we might want to consider lessening our equity allocation. We did that a lot back in 2007 and 8 where we were meeting with customers. No one knew the depths of what was to come, but we began looking at their allocation, their cash needs, and made adjustments. For example, instead of 60% stocks, we might have went to 50 or 40. We never recommend making rash decisions one way or the other, all cash or all stock or all fixed income, but there are times where it's prudent to change your mix. And those are things that if we ever saw a reason that we needed to do that, we'd come and make that recommendation. Or even in between meetings, Scott would pick up the phone and call and say, we need to discuss this.
We have a concern pertaining to the bubble. You know, the housing bubble brought back that domino effect of the 2007 and 8 recession, Great Recession. We kind of see a bubble now in the stock market portfolio. The way the stock market just cannot keep up the rate that it's going without something happening. And what's going to happen is when that bubble busts, what did you see there?
Well, respectfully, I disagree with that opinion.
Okay, cool.
And I put in the back of your packet, we won't reference it there, but if you can't sleep tonight, there's about 10 pages of economic reports and our outlook. But right now, we're very positive on the market. It's been a nice rally. It's been a long rally. But remember, the fundamentals of the stock market are based on how much money corporations are earning. That's what drives stock prices. And if you look, especially after this recent correction, the valuation of the stock market is not stretched. It is not in a territory where it was in 1999, 2000, that bubble. There's a measure called the price to earnings ratio that says, what's the value of the stock market? Is it expensive or is it cheap? And right now that's sitting at about 16 times earnings. That is not considered expensive based on how much money those companies are making. So we don't believe that the market is in bubble territory. Now, if companies start losing money, their earnings contract, the valuations of stocks get extremely out of hand, there might be concern, but we don't see that right now. Some individual companies are quite expensive, but the portfolio as a whole and the market as a whole, we don't believe is expensive. As a matter of fact, I mentioned that the market right now is valued at 16 times earnings. Your portfolio has a valuation closer to 14 and a half or 15 because the types of stocks that we buy are more conservative than the market as a whole.
Would a, one last thing here, Chief, and that'd be it, if you don't mind. What do you see, say, for instance, if there was a war, say on the Korean Peninsula, in Korea, what would that do to the market?
I have no idea.
Would it be?
It depends on, you just don't know.
You don't read into those type of, you don't have that at your bank or at your, you got people that expertise or anything that might be able to say?
Anything pertaining to any kind of war?
Depend.
Okay.
Is that one off?
There we go.
I'm finished.
Yeah.
I'm finished.
I can't predict what will happen in this world due to major events like that. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Question.
Legitimate question.
Go. I would say this. We've had wars, unrest, recessions, all that stuff for quite some time, and the economy and the market has proven itself resilient through those times. So this wouldn't be the first war that we have been through if that happens.
To expound on what Josh just said, I totally agree with him. If you look at Operation Desert Storm, if you look at the Iraq War in 2002, 2003, there is a tendency for the market to pull back for a short period of time, and then when they see or get accustomed to that combat activity, there's a tendency for it to start moving back up. And as horrible as it sounds, there is a tendency for the government during those times to pour more money into defense companies, petroleum companies, things of that nature. In other words, contracts are being spilled into it. So there is quite often in the state of a war a knee-jerk reaction of pulling back, evaluating, but then realizing, well, it's actually part of this is stimulating the economy. And then, believe it or not, citizens and institutions get accustomed to the war, and then there's a tendency for there to be a staging up of economic activity. The only exception to that would be a nuclear exchange, and then all bets are off, and it would be atrocious for humans and the economy. But I hate to use the word standard. In a standard or typical war, there's a tendency for a pullback, a reevaluation, and then a movement forward.
Thank you, that's all.
Sure.
Question.
First, I want to say thank you for explaining everything thoroughly, and making sure that we can all understand. I really appreciate that. I have some knowledge. I've been in the financial industry for 14 years, and I came from private wealth management in Memphis, Tennessee. So I understand a lot of what you're talking about. Work very closely with trust and managing portfolios for business owners who have $2 million in revenues each year. So I think a fair question would be, in the last 5 to 7 years, do you know, I don't know if you have the numbers with you, but I think it would be a fair question to ask, what is your investment management cost for us versus what income were you able to generate for us from the investment account? I know the 2 sub-accounts service the liquid funds, but what about the investment? So where are we on that? And then as well as, tell me what makes Arvest and the management, the investment management program that you have over there, which I was unaware of, so good to know. What makes your services more advantageous for the tribe, say, than another, I won't mention names, but another local investment service firm? I heard you say you had 14 different advisors, so does that come out as a cost for us? Are you contracting some of that out for that advisement, or is that in-house owned? So just an idea of how your departments actually have to charge a cost so that you're still making a profit as a financial institution yourself.
Very good. Very good. There we go. Okay. Great question. Let me answer. See if I can get my arm long enough here. Over the last 5 years, after our fee, which is 0.5% is our management fee. I will tell you that is discounted significantly from our standard fee. We've done that for 14 years. We've made that so 0.5% is the fee. The 5-year return after that fee has been 5.61%. Remember, about half of that time, it was 70%.
30% equity, 70% fixed.
70% fixed income, so it was a conservative portfolio. Our portfolio team is included in that cost. Our portfolio team is part of Arvest Bank, Arvest Trust Company. There is no third-party manager cost. Arvest Trust Company manages close to $4 billion across our 4-state footprint: Kansas, Oklahoma, Missouri, and Arkansas. So we have the capacity, due to our size, of managing quite a bit of funds. In Bartlesville alone, we manage right at $1 billion out of Bartlesville. So our team in Bartlesville is a significant part of the entire Arvest Trust Company group. Did I cover all of it?
Distinctions between us and others.
Yes, for me. Can you say, percentage-wise, I think that's great. Can you give the dollar amount? Do you have it? I think that just helps equate it better in the mind.
4 million times 0.5%, $20,000 a year.
$20,000 a year. And then the other half of that question was, what advantages do we have from continuing business with Arvest versus, say, another financial investment firm that investments are what they specialize in?
There we go. Okay. One of the biggest differences is a few things. Our size. We have that team of individuals. Scott and I are the local team assigned to your account. We have a handful of accounts that we manage for individuals, nonprofits, institutions like this. But that portfolio team is, again, part of our group. But I think the biggest differentiator is that we are a bank trust department, that we are a fiduciary, which means we have to, regardless of any other factor, act on your best behalf. There are other investment firms that have to provide what is suitable if they are not a fiduciary. Bank trust departments are designed to be fiduciaries, meaning we have to act on your behalf above all else. We cannot have any self-interest or conflicts of interest.
The advantage of cost compared to.
Okay, one last question. Do you know the amount of funds that you actually manage in Bartlesville?
Can't hear it.
$1
Here
billion.
locally? Locally, it's 1 million.
1 billion.
1 billion here locally, and 4 billion across your 4 states.
That's right.
Are your 14 people here, or are they spread across your 4 states?
Spread.
Spread.
They are-
How many are here besides you two?
Well, let me explain that. In Bartlesville, we have 20 individuals in Bartlesville that have, there's about 12 or 13 that have Scott's roll, that are assigned advisors to accounts. So Bartlesville, we have several client advisors that are relationship managers. My role as the local investment officer, there's 3 of us. Those 14 individuals that I talked about, they are not part of the Bartlesville specific team. They're for that entire group. And they manage the $4 billion as a whole. But we have in Bartlesville, through Scott and our other advisors, $1 billion of that. Those portfolio managers are mostly in Lowell, Arkansas. That's where Arvest headquarters is. There's a few in Little Rock, a few in Kansas City, but that's where they're mostly located.
So you're a licensed broker. You have a licensed broker here?
Scott and I both have our brokerage licenses. We are both licensed brokers. That doesn't apply to this relationship because we act as licensed brokers, but in this capacity, we work for the trust department.
Are either of you CTOs then? Certified trust officers?
Scott is we are both hold the Certified Trust and Financial Advisor, CTFA. I am a Certified Financial Planner. I hold that designation. And we both hold the Chartered Financial Consultant designation. Scott also has the REBC, Registered Employee Benefits Consultant. So
thank you.
We like to study. Great questions. Thanks for letting us brag on ourselves. We are very proud of the fact that Bartlesville, that we have $1 billion in trust assets. That's something we're very proud of. Great question.
Any further questions? Members?
My only question is, when we have people speak from the audience, please state your name so that we'll have a record of who spoke, please.
I have one more question regarding any future fees. Would you keep it at 0.5% for any other activity?
That's my plan. The reason I say it that way, as the administrator for the account, I have limited authority to keep it there. So far, so good. And I hope to keep it at 0.5% or 50 basis points for a while longer.
that because you like us so much.
Kind of partial to y'all.
Susan has her.
Susan?
Susan Kate. My question is, what is, since you're charging 0.5%, what is the minimum out there for other banks or other, other banks? What do they charge other than, you're doing 0.5%, what do they charge?
Other institutions, you're asking me? I don't know what your firm would probably say. Good, good. I was actually going to say that a moment ago that just to give you some idea of the discount level, it's been a while since I've done this. I believe the average equity or stock mutual fund charges approximately 1.25 to 1.5%. So if you went to a specific website of a company and you dug in and the transparency of the operating expenses, you'd probably see it somewhere between around 1.5. Were you a registered investment advisory firm, an RIA?
Yeah.
Okay. And they charged anywhere from 1.5 to 2%. That's pretty common throughout the industry. Trust companies have a tendency to be just a little bit less expensive. Number one, because they've been around for 3 centuries. Number two, not us personally, yeah. I'm about a century. Number two, they have a little bit different set of regulations compared to brokerage firms. So there's a tendency for them to be a little bit less expensive. We actually just went through some training where a consultant came in and told us about the cost of other trust companies throughout this region. And I would say it's fair to say that a true trust where Arvest is acting as a trustee, most other organizations were charging 1.25 to 1.5%. So as you can see, I don't keep meaning to tell you how much of a good discount you got, but we are substantially lower than our standard fee schedule and substantially lower than other institutions in the region.
Joe Brooks?
Chiefly, I'd make a comment to Susan's question.
Yes.
It's been about approximately 1.5 years ago, the trust board had 4 different asset management companies come in, do a presentation. Arvest was by far the most discounted rate. There were some of them as high as 3%. And we chose to stay with Arvest, the trust board as a whole. So.
Thank you.
Brother Crawford?
I don't have a question. I've been around a while. When you first came to work for us, the company that we had before apparently charged a small percent, but there were a lot of hidden fees. Every time they did a transaction, they charged us more. So it was an enormous amount that we were being charged. That was a big relief when we went with them.
Thank you. And sadly, they also put you in some investments that were below investment quality and you lost a lot of money.
About $1 million.
Right, I recall that. And so, you know, God willing, we won't ever raise our fee, but there probably will be a day it does raise. But know this, that even if we do, we're still probably going to be substantially lower than who you've already met with. But also, like a registered investment advisor is a fiduciary and a trust company is a fiduciary, we're not likely to put you in some type of asset that has the potential for massive decline like your previous institution had. That's where trust companies really shine. We're only going to put you in companies that, by our evaluation, our analysis, have good prospects for growth. They're not a new upstart company. They're not speculative in nature. And the bonds question earlier, we're not going to put you in any bonds unless they're BBB or higher investment quality. where other institutions might put you in a bond that may be paying you a more attractive rate, but it also has the potential for default. And that's what hurt you 14 years ago, was the default of several organizations to the number of $1 million. We're not going to do that.
Scott Thompson. Josh Randolph. We appreciate all the diligence and come out and talk to us. I guess it's been about 6 months or maybe a year almost since we last talked. Let's give our best a hand. Guys.
Thank you.
Just on behalf of the trust board, we'd like to thank you also for your diligence, and thank you for coming out, giving us this information.
We're honored to serve you, and we appreciate the relationship very much.
I think you're doing excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We've got one resolution under new business and the travel authorization. Could Secretary Randall read the resolution 2018-07?
Resolution 2018-07, a resolution of the Tribal Council of the Delaware Tribe of Indians authorizing the submission of a funding application under the fiscal year 18 Coordinated Tribal Assistance Solicitation. Whereas Delaware Tribe Council is authorized by Article 5 of the Constitution and bylaws of the Delaware Tribe of Indians to represent and act in all matters that concern the general welfare of the tribe. And whereas the Delaware Tribal Council of the Delaware Tribe of Indians adopts this resolution out of concern for the health and well-being of the Delaware Tribe of Indians, tribal members, and families, and recognizes its sovereign authority and responsibility to make specific laws on behalf of the Delaware Tribal people. Whereas Delaware Tribal Council has determined it is in the best interest of the tribal community to make application for the fiscal year 2018 Coordinated Tribal Assistance Solicitation for funding under Purpose Area 6, Children's Justice Act Partnerships for Indian Communities. And now, therefore, it be resolved, the Delaware Tribal Council of the Delaware Tribe of Indians approves and authorizes the submission of the fiscal year 2018 Coordinated Tribal Assistance Solicitation application for the Children's Justice Act Partnership for Indian Communities, Purpose Area Number 6. Be it further resolved that the Delaware Tribe of Indians believes such funding is necessary and appropriate for funding of specific services within the Delaware Tribe.
Also moved.
Second.
Been moved and seconded to approve this resolution. Discussion. Question been called. All in favor of approval of resolution 2018-07, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Let the record show that the resolution 2018-07 passes unanimously. Want me to do a quick?
May I address the next item on the agenda?
Certainly.
There's a FCC meeting on March 22nd at 9:30 in the morning, and I just think that it's imperative that Chief Brooks be present for that meeting, and so I would like to make a motion that we approve Chief's travel to DC for that meeting.
I'll second.
Motion been made and seconded. Is there any discussion? Question called. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 Opposed? And all abstained. Although I'll throw in here that it's probably imperative that we go to this meeting. The FCC has been caught up in the thing that I think they want to forget about the government relationship. Tribes.
Is this about cell tower income?
Yes.
That is very critical.
John Sumter.
John Sumter. That's okay, I think I can do that. This meeting with the FCC, is this having to deal with our 106 monies? It's got everything to do with it.
It has everything to do with it.
Yes.
Are we gonna get a report on this? We never get a report on any of the travels such as this, and this is very well important to our tribe.
Will most definitely report at our next council meeting.
Okay, at this time, I'll have a written request in tomorrow before the weekend. I would personally like to request the amount total of 106 monies that we have received to date, how they were broke down, and where they were expended to. And I'll have that in writing before the weekend. Thank you.
Yeah, John, we've got no problem with telling you how much money we've received. I assume you're talking over the last 2 years.
Since its inception and we started
Or
receiving.
2.5 years. I will say right now it was substantial, and the FCC is thinking about making it zilch.
That's right. And that's the reason I
Point
work
of
so
order,
hard.
call for question.
Excuse me.
A point of order. John, a
I
point,
still had the floor.
John, a point of order has been made. What is the point of order?
That this is no discussion from the floor of him getting information. We have a motion on the floor to vote in the trial.
If I may, yes, yeah, we can. The period discussion has been over, and even afterwards, we're not to talk about it.
Question's been called, and point of order is well taken. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
I see how it stands.
Opposed? And I abstain again. And I will report what happens. I hope it's not critically sad what happens. Now, is Amy Turner out there?
Amy Turner's in Michigan or somewhere.
I thought she had some codes that it was mentioned.
They're behind it.
They're in that resolution.
For the CTS.
They're attached to the resolution, okay. Could we're about to get into the meat of this meeting tonight. Could we take a 10-minute break?
So moved.
Have a drink? And a trip to the restroom?
So moved.
I'll second that.
Flynn moved and seconded to take a 10-minute recess. Could be back in 10 minutes.